Welcome to another edition of CSG Vodcast. Today's guest is Dave Leveille of Crush Networks. Now, Dave and I met at the International Associate of Microsoft Partners, or IAMCP, where he is currently the president of the San Diego chapter. Dave has spent the past 21 years in various IT leadership and project management roles. He brings tons of technical and operational experience from a wide variety of industries in sectors such as Microsoft, Harvard Business School, Walt Disney Company, just to name a few. Additionally, Dave holds 25 plus Microsoft professional certifications. Dave, it's great to have you on our Vodcast. And yes, that is the right term. So let's jump right into this. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the benefits, challenges of the technology that you're really good at, and that's SharePoint, or take it any direction you'd like, but that's one of the areas I think we should talk about.
Sure. I think one of the biggest problems is that it is so easy to use that one of the biggest problems we see is that customers get excited because it's so easy to use. And, there's a limitation of what you get included with SharePoint out of the box with your subscription to Microsoft 365, like an E5 license, for example. And people use it and they love it. And usually, depending on the size of the company, how many employees there are, oftentimes they either use up the space really quickly that they're allotted and receive a bill to add more storage, or they don't know that they're doing it, but some members of the company might share files anonymously outside to everyone. And I'd say, they want us to come in and show them what's been shared and who's been shared with. So I'd really say that usage patterns, and how they've set up sharing tends to come up the most in the engagements that I'm in.
Wow. So that's interesting to me. So that would fall into the category of common mistakes people use. Is that right?
Well, I don't know if it's so much, sharing files anonymously. They've made it so external sharing is not on by default anymore in the tenant, which is great. But for those that had that feature enabled and started sharing files, 3 years ago or whatever, they often don't know the impact of that. And that, when leadership finds out, is usually cause for alarm. And then when I show the leadership that it's typically the leadership people themselves that are creating the problem, that's when we have a pretty engaging discussion. It really doesn't matter whose fault it is. Some could blame Microsoft. You could blame doesn't matter who on the team is it. I'm here to help and get people unblocked and reel that all back in and let them know how much of their data was exposed and stuff like that.
So that's kind of your role. You come in and you help companies ascertain what's going on in their SharePoint. From a technology standpoint, what do you find yourself doing for some of your larger organizations that need help in their SharePoint environment?
That's a really good question. I would say a big portion of what we're doing is systems integration to other line of business systems. So we typically now, for the last few years, have been doing quite a bit of stuff in the Power Platform, meaning we're using Power, what they now call Power Automate, to do business process automations and basically workflows and make the processes digital and align with the company's goals and objectives. And the other piece is that there is a lot of things like the older InfoPath forms, which is a technology Microsoft developed, where you host online forms in SharePoint. Well, some of that technology, well, first of all, nothing has changed in that arena since 2013. Microsoft spent all its development dollars working towards the Power Apps, which is also part of the Power Platform. So what we're seeing is a lot of migrations from, or not really migrations, but refactoring of old business processes they were doing a certain way electronically is now being migrated into the new technology. And that is not uncommon. Many many companies over the years, they switch, document management systems, or they switch what they do, their business process automation, or they're looking to leverage AI in their internal processes and try to, shave a second, a minute, whatever off what they're doing. So people are interested and asking a lot of questions, and we're building a lot of solutions really on the Power Platform. And that a lot of that happened because of the work from home and during the pandemic. And now it's the coming back to office. We're seeing a lot of things like that where we're tracking employees who are coming back to work and stuff like that.
I was going to ask you about that, how that affected your job, or what people bring Crush Networks in to help them do. But what would you say if a company was engaged in some new project, or perhaps, like you said, their workforce is starting to show back up? What would be the primary thing they might want to contact you and Crush Networks to help them streamline, fix, or maybe even integrate some of the AI that you were talking about?
Yeah, terrific. Thank you. It's really a mixed bag. A lot of people are doing things still with Microsoft Teams. The other thing that I'm seeing is like they want one lens into the organization. They don't want to go, to Slack or iMessage or email. They just want to work within a single pane of glass. And so we're doing a lot of custom solutions to show more things from various line of business apps within Teams. So honestly, the chatbots and things that you've heard of years ago, we're starting to get more requests for that and to work with partners to develop solutions for that. I can give you plenty of examples of that. But you also mentioned at the beginning of your question with the when how things affected the business. Well, what really happened was at the beginning of the pandemic, our customers, who are large enterprises, all had budget for us for the next 2+ years, and they put a priority on making sure that they could keep their full-time employees. And so contingent staff and contractors and business to business partners like us were usually the first on the chopping block. And so what we saw was, of course, an enormous revenue dip for the first, like the first month we were okay. Second month, it was like, oh, something is really happening. We're down 30%. And then by, I don't know what it was, like April of 2019, it was like, bam, like everybody who didn't want to, they wanted us to stop work on those contracts, and then we're holding these contracts going, well, we have another like $200,000 already signed with you. We want to bill against that. And they're like, no, we can't even pay you. I know the contract's still good. And what happened is it took a couple months, but our bigger existing customers were like, hey, we need to now track COVID at our offices. We need to see how the employees are doing, those that are now working from home in front of Teams or Slack or whatever they were using at the time, Zoom even. They want to track their health and how they're doing it at home, not just COVID stuff, but their mental health and their well-being. So there was a huge pivot, and we were building dashboards and Power BI and doing a lot of Azure SQL projects to track responses for these companies with 30 to 120,000 employees. And so that changed, and that we weren't doing things to streamline business operations. We were doing things to help them monitor how somebody who was a bank teller in a branch is now handling working from home, doing customer support phone calls. And that was the big pivot. So that meant all the bigger things we were doing and bigger initiatives, multi-year initiatives, just became, hey, we just need a report, and we need a way to capture this information. We need a way to visualize this information, and then we need a way to analyze the information. And that's when we started doing way more business intelligence. and Power BI, probably 60% of our business. And then, of course, since then, as companies, the airlines and stuff have ramped up, we're doing a lot of things that just help them visualize um, like which airports, which they call stations, have the most sick people. Like, so they can say, all right, our flights are leaving 5 minutes late on average from Chicago or Atlanta or wherever. And you can overlay the delayed departures with the fact that they have 1,200 people sick in that office, that station. It's stuff like that.
Wow.
It's just pivoted. It's interesting.
Yeah.
One of our large banks that has branches everywhere in the world, they have a giant. They had me develop like a world map and then put the little bubbles that show how big or small or how bad it is.
Wow.
So it was pretty interesting in that the news was saying, there's these problems, blah, 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 here and there. And then I had like this real time report showing me that it was a little bit different, or I could even see, before the news would release it, like 2 weeks before, I could see new trends because my customers were having me do that. And it was pretty interesting. So when you heard it was bad, like in New York, and it was locking down, I was like, yeah, I've got an airline customer there. I have a hedge fund there. I have 2 banks there. These are all people that were doing this report. And I could, look at their reports separately on my 5 different screens here. And I could see, yeah, New York is really, really bad.
Wow.
And then it wasn't long after that it was, on the news like every day that it was bad. So,
wow.
Anyway, it's interesting. I won't say that it got us to the levels of revenue where we were previously, but just to circle the wagons on that. So the people that had budget to do like this different work stream altogether to build something that was tracking how many people, buy an in-flight meal, for example, we just did a change order for the statement of work. And they needed the information like yesterday. Where are all the branches closing down because all the tellers are sick, for example? They needed that right away. So we do the report and at the same time do the change order, but they needed something like within 2 weeks to show what the trends were.
Wow.
And that was just really fascinating. Revenue wise, I would say, gosh, it took I don't even know if we're all the way back to where we were pre-pandemic. We were getting close, but I'd say during the pandemic, I mean, we were very busy doing reports, which frankly don't pay as well as the systems integration and other work we were doing. So we were very busy, but the gross revenue was, probably 30% below where it was. Of course, had we pivoted to cybersecurity and doing the kind of work that you do with carrier people, everybody going to Teams, all our customers were already on Teams, most of them. So, or had we decided that we want to make investments on AI like 3 years ago when, people were talking about it, we probably would have seen our revenue go a different direction. But for now, we are extremely busy. We have got several more customers. We have qualified about 15 leads, and we're following up trying to turn them into customers. And we've got 4 events before the end of the year. So things are looking to get back to, January 2019 levels again.
Well, Dave, those examples are fantastic. I think the viewing audience would find them very interesting and probably give them some ideas of when they should contact you at Crush Networks. For all of you out there, Dave's information will be on the back end of this vlog. So make sure you check in and contact Dave at Crush Networks and see how he can help your organizations or maybe some of your clients. Dave, thanks again for your time. It was fantastic as usual.
My pleasure, David. Thanks
Thank you,
everybody
sir.
for watching.